The 5 worst states for preppers to retire. Ooh, what a great article. This is right up my alley that I got from LouRockwell.com. And being from Maine, I'm a prepper inherently. If you're from Maine, especially if you live on an island, you can't help but not be a prepper, or else you're dumb. That's all there's to it. Being a prepper doesn't necessarily mean the apocalypse. It just means at the end of the day, electric grid down, no food. You got to have water. You need to have preps, dude. You got to be prepping at all times. In this case, it's more of a grid down thing more than just a couple days. Anyway, so this is prep group. Preppy group or prep group with 2 P's. All right. We don't get to choose where we live, at least not the state we live in. For most of us, that's determined by our work. Yep. But what about when our jobs no longer determine where we live? Most people don't move once they retire, but you'd be surprised how many people actually do. The area where I live has tens of thousands of retired residents who come down here to escape the cold weather up north. All right, good. So here's my list of, this is what it says here, my criteria for the worst places to retire for preppers. All right, population density. The higher the population density of an area, the more a fight for resources. This fight will probably hurt the poor, the aging, and single mothers more than anyone, as they will be just steamrolled, 100%. Survival of the fittest will take over as people literally fight for the limited available resources. Average annual rainfall, 100%. We all know that water is going to be a problem in a post-disaster world. Areas with little rainfall and few rivers will be hard to live in. Yep, exactly. I completely agree. For most of us, the best way of harvesting water is with a rainfall capture, which I have, and you can't have in Colorado. It's illegal, last I heard. Political leaning. Yep, exactly. Many of the bluest states in the country are also the ones which working hardest to take away your 2A rights. Exactly. So if you live in a blue state, they're going to probably try to ban your firearms and throw you in jail. We know that. Federally owned land. Now, this is one I'm not so sure I agree with. I get what he's saying, but it's interesting. A lot of people talk about bugging out to the wild. That's great. I have my own plans for that as well. But in most cases, the only practical place to bug out into the wild is federally owned land. National parks, national forests, and the land that's under control of the federal government. Utah, Arizona, all those western states have tons of federally owned land. I disagree with that, though, because at the end of the day, if we're grid down, private property rights aren't going to be respected. So just because freaking Mr. Burns owns 1 million acres in freaking Wisconsin doesn't mean because it's private that he's going to have the force to protect that land. So I don't know. I disagree with that. He's trying to say federally owned land because no one lives on it right now. Well, if it's private property and it's not federally owned, no one lives on that either for the most part, if that makes sense. I disagree. I think mostly it's the population density. Forestation. The most practical means of heating a home in a post-disaster world is with wood, 100%. That means having a lot of forest available where you can cut that wood. Yep. This leaves out huge swaths of the nation, such as the entire breadbasket, which is farmland, not forest. Yeah, it'll be forested pretty soon once we stop farming it, though. But yeah, you're definitely gonna need wood at least for the first couple of years for sure. All right. So the worst states: New York. He lived in upstate New York for a number of years, and it's beautiful. Miles of hardwood forests, lakes, and rivers. But even so, the state is one of the most heavily populated in the country. It was also one of the most left-leaning states, with some of the harshest anti-gun laws around. It would be a difficult state to survive in. Can you imagine all those freaking zombies from New York City coming up? They're like, we need food, Josh. We voted for AOC. We're so stupid, and we need your food. Yeah, dude, it steamrolled in 2 seconds flat. California, of course. In many ways, California and New York are copies of each other. Both have high population and are both strongly blue, which means they're dominated by idiot zombies in the big cities, LA, San Francisco. We're zombies. We need food, Josh. We voted for Nancy Pelosi. We don't know how to take care of ourselves, so take care of us, and we'll take you down. We can in California, because it's so heavily dense, we can expect many people to expand outwards from the major population centers. Yep. Florida, what? At first glance, Florida looks like a great place to go, and a lot of people retire there. But much of the state is covered up by the Everglades, so unless you're going to learn how to survive in that harsh environment, it's not a great place to be in a situation down scenario. The lack of forestation isn't much of an issue as you're not going to have to heat your home. It's still going to get cold there, though. But you are going to have to worry about hurricanes. And don't forget, Florida. I read someplace that Florida's like the second flattest place in the world after like the Dead Sea or something like that. So not only hurricanes, but the flooding that goes with them. And then it's a peninsula. So like you're right here, dude. You're down here. If you got to escape, everyone's going north. There's no other place to go. Everyone's going north. So you're going to get destroyed. And don't forget, Florida's heavily populated now anyway. Yeah, you don't want to survive there. Arizona, yeah, I've talked about Arizona. Get the hell out of Arizona, dude. It's extremely hot. It's a desert. But there's little water to be found. So not only is it hot, there's no water. And there's no trees. Cactuses, what, you get chopped down cactuses? I mean, come on. And by the way, at night, Arizona gets flipping cold, dude. When the sun goes down in the desert, it's cold. If anyone's been in the Army and has gone to NTC, National Training Center in Victorville, it's right outside Fort Baker. I can't remember. Fort Ord. Fort Ord? I forgot. You remember, you're out there in the field. You're like, dude, it's freezing at night, man. And I remember that just living in Phoenix. Like at night, you're like, dang, it's cold. And the beautiful heat tab in the sky comes up and you're good to go. Minnesota, which is known as the land of 1,000 lakes. So there's no shortage of water there. Lots of forestation department as well. It's actually a lot going for the state, but it and its neighbor of Wisconsin have very high populations. I voted for Ilhan Omar. That's Minnesota and Wisconsin. I'm not sure who the fools are in Wisconsin. Obviously the Gudna, but either way. And I voted for Keith Ellison. I'm an idiot. Unless you get out in the boonies, it might be hard to avoid crowds. Of course, way out in the boonies is the coldest part of the state, so you're going to have to deal with the cold. Yeah, 100%. Granted, a lot of other states we can rule out based on the same criteria. Pretty much all the eastern and western seaboards would be bad places to go. I completely agree. So he has his top 5. We'll redo another video on that. I thought this was a pretty good comment right here. Florida is surrounded by 3 sides of salt water, which is very, very bad for people intending to flee a disaster. Even with a boat, one would be trapped out at sea, very visible from miles away and terribly vulnerable. 100%, dude. American city, one must take into account American cities the Russians and Chinese will target with nuclear, chemical, NBC warfare. In case of lasting power outages, jammed up highways, food shortages, and similar crises, mass mobs of people will likely burst out of major cities and sweep through the countryside. 100%, dude. That's completely agree. There are massive migrations away from disaster zones like California, New York, to places like Florida, Texas right now. Just talked to a lady today. Her and her husband crushed in California, and her boss has moved to Florida. They're like, we got to get out of here at some point because California is nuts. I'm not sure where she ended up going. Maybe Florida. I don't know, but I didn't get that. I forgot now what their plan is. But you're like, dude, everyone's moved to Florida or at least not everyone, but the people who can see the future are moving to Florida, at least out of California. I won't say moving to Florida. This guy did. Lots of people moved to Florida from California, so that's not unusual. But this guy's business would tell you that he sees something that we should pay attention to, which I won't get into here. The coast of Florida provide an easy escape from any number of environmental disasters. There's the Bahamas to the east and quite a few Caribbean islands to the south. Yeah, the Caribbeans are going to love these white people from Florida when America doesn't defend them anymore, are coming down. Yeah, they're not going to be too kind to you, that's for sure. People who have been living in the country for most of their lives are not going to be easy pickings for hungry city dwellers. I don't know about that. The biggest cities is the deplorability of gang members to hit their intended targets with pretty much any firearm. For example, Indiana has forested areas in the southern part of the state. However, many states have areas with lower population that could be played. He says Indiana. In the southern part of Illinois, 100%. East Texas being a good area. However, I lived in Texas for 30 years, and some people still give me a hard time for my Yankee accent. Waiting until retirement to move means you won't have friends and know the area well enough to fit in. I completely agree, dude. I left South Texas when I retired because I don't speak Spanish. All right. I agree with that. Have you ever lived in North Florida? Have you heard of the whatever that is, Ocala National Forest? It is extremely rural, and the population density is very small. Yes, there can be hurricanes, but anywhere along the Gulf Coast is the same. Just steer clear of Jacksonville and stay north of Atlanta, and you should be, or Orlando, you should be fine. Interesting. Is there a reply on here? No. Okay. Anyway, there's the top 5 states to avoid if you're a prepper in retirement. Love your thoughts. We'll see you.